Good afternoon and welcome to this Chemistry World webinar. I'm Ben Valsler, Chemistry World's digital editor. Now, we have a partner for today's webinar, as we do for many of them, and that's Dotmatics, a leader in R&D scientific software that connects science, data, and decision-making together. They have more than 2 million scientists worldwide who are already using Dotmatics platform to help create a healthier, cleaner, and safer world. Now, Dotmatics came to us partly because they want to reach out to you guys as scientists, as researchers, because they think they can help solve the problems that you're encountering, help you do better, cheaper, more efficient research, get to market quicker with promising new therapeutics that will help to make the world a little bit healthier, and also because they have a fantastic speaker who some of you who've been attending more Chemistry World webinars will have seen before, and that's Haydn Boehm. Now, Haydn has 20 years of experience in the life science industry, PhD in organic chemistry. He's worked with companies like Thermo Fisher, Johnson Matthey, and recently Merck KGaA as well. So he knows this industry like the back of his hand, and that means he's exactly the right person to talk to us today about Dotmatics and their platform and how it can make your work that little bit more efficient, get you to market quicker with new exciting drugs. So I'm going to hand over now to Haydn. Keep your questions coming in. If you have any questions about Haydn's presentation, about the general area of small molecule drug discovery at the moment, Haydn's got his finger on the pulse and will be able to direct you in exactly the right way. We've got Haydn on screen now. Hi, thank you for joining us, Haydn. It's lovely to see you again.
Lovely, my absolute pleasure, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to the presentation. I'd love to hear more about what Dotmatics have in the pipeline for us. So I will hand over to you and I'll come back with our audience's questions a little bit later on.
Super, brilliant. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody from wherever you're viewing this from. So as Ben has already done a lovely introduction as to sort of who I am and where I come from, we'll probably just jump straight in. So as Ben said, Dotmatics have been in the industry for over 15 years, and they've been developing software to support small molecule drug discovery during the course of that time, and large molecule as well. We've been working with over 2 million scientists during our 15-year tenure, and you can see sort of where these scientists have been coming from with the logos at the bottom of the slide. And this has been sort of a wonderful collaboration over the course of that timeline as we've been looking to sort of iterate and innovate and develop software that eliminates sort of certain tasks that can be removed to optimize that sort of timeline and sort of data integrity and sort of much more informed decision making for small molecule drug discovery. And that's very much been the ethos sort of as we've been evolving as a company over the 15 years, and it's really about sort of getting the best insight to what's happening, with the molecule, with the target site, the interaction. Whoever's got the best data is going to be able to make the best decisions and get to that therapy faster, which is realistically what we as an industry are all looking for. So, as Ben said, there's a really interesting time. So 10 years ago, I was working in the US and leading sort of the marketing for Sigma Aldrich, and specifically around Aldrich chemistry. And this is where sort of large molecule was just starting to sort of come into play. And it was deemed to be the doom and the death of small molecule drug discovery. But what we've seen, when we look at the graphic on the right-hand side here for the FDA approvals of small molecules and biologics, is that actually, rather than being the death, actually we're seeing, as Ben said, small molecules having a renaissance and gradually increasing the number of therapies that are, or approvals over this timeline. And there's been a number of different reasons for that, and the cheminformatics have played a big part of it. So improved technologies to sort of uncover this new potential, where we've been able to sort of identify much better sort of the target sites for our diseases, and that's meant as our understanding of the target site has got better, so we've been able to model better. That's improved our computational chemistry, the modeling to predict the target, and this has unlocked a huge amount of uncharted biologically active chemical space. So really now what was deemed undruggable from small molecule actually is now druggable. So there's this race to go explore. With all of the elements around this, other sort of factors that improve sort of the uptake here is that it's a simpler discovery and development process for small molecule versus large molecules. There's a favorability there. But also the cost of that development also has an impact on sort of the price of the therapy and the populace that it can reach. So, this sort of cost efficacy and going to a broader, market populace is also a very attractive part of a small molecule therapy as well. So again, we've got this renaissance. So how do we, get to uncover this sort of this uncharted territory and identify these cures for, curable and chronic diseases? Well, the pipeline, and this maybe sort of, that pipeline itself may be sort of familiar to many of you. And the data that's in this slide is really a harmonized version of multiple different papers that are out there that would talk about cost, time, numbers of candidates, etc. So it's really just a sort of an overview of what's out there in the landscape. But when we look at that sort of discovery through to commercialization, there's a cost of around sort of 1 to 3 billion. It takes about 18 years from start to finish. In the number of molecules that we need to make, typically we're building a library of 10,000 in order to get to one drug. So what we see is a high attrition rate. And so the view here is that where you see sort of the spend of up to 40% in discovery, there's a big chunk of potentially sort of a third of that timeline of bringing a drug to market is in discovery as well. And we're seeing sort of this really high attrition rate coming through. There's a lot of hidden costs around the whole molecule. There's a lot of hidden workarounds. So I think the sort of questions that we can sort of look at here and say, well, could cheminformatics help us reduce the cost, reduce these timelines, improve our attrition rate, make better decisions, and remove a lot of the risk that's been associated to this process? Now, during the course of the last sort of 20 or so years, what we've seen is that R&D costs have continued to increase, through the noughties. That started to be offset and stabilized from a sort of more bottom line sort of perspective by outsourcing to CROs and sort of really spreading the work around pretty quick and sort of more cost effectively at a bottom line sort of commercial level. However, there's a sort of couple of hidden factors that come into play here, is that we've now increased the workflow complexity and also the data flow complexity. And that's often been something that is not necessarily been captured or qualified or quantified. Certainly there are no white papers out there that would talk to this and the hidden cost of working in CRO at this point in time. But what's also sort of seen is that as you're looking at this more sort of complex data transfer, there's a requirement for new software and capabilities in order to optimize this potential sort of way of reducing the timeline to a therapy. So another sort of concept that's really sort of made headlines, big investment at the moment, is the sort of utilization of artificial intelligence and machine learning in small molecule drug discovery. We're sort of seeing sort of wide AI adoption. Certainly it's a huge buzzword that makes it to most sort of AGM reports. There's an unprecedented sort of level of funding towards it. And it's being deemed as this panacea to revolutionize the industry. However, what we do see, and this graphic on the right-hand side sort of showcases this a little bit, is that these expectations have yet to be met. There are only out of these 250 active drugs that have claimed that they've sort of been in development with AI and machine learning. There's only really a couple of therapies that have made it to phase 2. And again, that's our cycle time is really long. There are a couple of companies that are doing this that have claimed that they've taken 15 months off this discovery phase. But the reality is that we actually haven't got to therapy yet. And so what's been happening is that there's been sort of misaligned expectations, if you like, around what AI can achieve. And that's also seen as sort of a knock-on effect of sort of devaluations and decreasing investment in the last sort of 18 months. But this to say that actually there's a challenge here around utilizing AI and how you think strategically about implementing it. But one of the big challenges that have been identified, and this paper from Deloitte really sort of highlights that, is that in many cases, companies' data and scientific data is not necessarily ready to be utilized by the AI. And there's a challenge in terms of data hygiene and also data accessibility. So this reusability of the data actually isn't there. So the AI doesn't really have a chance in many situations to actually do this. So, really there's a huge push now to sort of try and ensure the standardization of data and the integrity of data in order to, really be able to sort of leverage the potential of artificial intelligence for drug discovery. So those are sort of some key areas that we sort of looked at. And so now if we sort of just double click on sort of what is small molecule drug discovery and where are there the potentials to optimize the process using cheminformatics. Really where we've sort of spent our time focusing is looking around this sort of, once you've got the hit through whatever method you want, be it lead driven or target driven, really then taking that lead and developing and enumerating and iterating multiple libraries to sort of try and optimize the actual lead itself before you send candidates through to preclinical development. And if we sort of look at, well, what does that sort of cycle look like in terms of sort of the tiny tasks, if you like, or specific tasks that are required, then actually, as we go through this make, test, decide wheel, this will probably seem quite familiar. So we sort of either come up with an idea, and then we want to design a compound or a number of compounds, synthesize them, be it in there or library, purify, register the compound, make sure we've got it in the inventory, then send it to a request to get it characterized, QC'd. Then once we've got that, it is what we think it is in the flask. Then we want to sort of send that for assay screening. We want to see the results come back for this and then analyze the structural activity relationship of this and then start selecting what we thought performed the best, our hit selection, and then enumerate again. And we keep going through this cycle until we've sort of really got, typically brought 10,000 compounds through in order to pick what we think is our best candidates to take into preclinical development. Now, for this cycle here, over the course of the years, there's been multiple sort of point solutions that have optimized specific tasks on that cycle. So, example, lots of this terminology is probably pretty familiar to everybody on the webinar today. So you've got the electronic lab notebooks, entity registration softwares, sample management, assay data management, scientific searching, visualization and analysis, your document management, sketching tools, requesting tools, library design tools. So, and I sort of purposefully put these in different colors because there are different vendors that offer these softwares. And often as companies are building up their sort of cheminformatics ecosystem for small molecule drug discovery, they've usually got different point solutions from different vendors. Now, the challenge with that is that they've all got a different data code in many cases. So the way of plumbing them all together, the burden of that actually falls with the buyer. So therefore, as an organization, you have to sort of start thinking about building and having a research IT department that deals with all of these pieces here around authorization, security, linking into other toolkits that you may have, anything you've homebrewed. You've got data access. You've got to look at your application data, your platform data, how you manage and configure that and make these things work together. Then looking at any third parties that you want to integrate as part of your process, and obviously working in collaboration has been a massive benefit, as we've seen as we sort of step out of the last sort of 3 years of global challenges. So there's a lot of burden here put on anybody working in drug discovery. Your company and your organization have to manage all of this. And so, that's where we're starting to see a recent paper that we've commissioned, again, with Deloitte and Gartner, is that we're seeing that, typically 80% of R&D data is stuck either in sort of some of the softwares or around sort of these tools. And that sort of manifested itself in the fact that, when we sort of interviewed a lot of the scientists that we've spoken to, 80% state that they are having to put in manual workarounds to move the data to where they need it. And actually, this is having a negative impact on their productivity of actually, making molecules and looking at sort of, testing out new molecules. There's a huge amount of administrative work that is involved with moving data between data capture, moving it, transcribing it, and it's having a negative impact. Also, with this multiple elements of transcription that have also been caught up in different version controls, be it in Excel spreadsheets or it's on a version that's on a memory stick, it's on a laptop, it's in a database. There's a challenge around version control, and over 2/3 of the scientists that we spoke to reported having compromised decision making. And again, when we think about how we're priming ourselves to solve the world's health challenges, if we're having this discovery phase where 2/3 are being, the decision making is being compromised because of, irregularities or lack of trust in the data, or not having all the data to make the right informed decisions, this looks like a pretty, burning platform for optimization. Now, again, that scientist challenge has now been sort of over the course of the last sort of 10 years, we've started to see this progress into having more data scientists in organizations. And again, this paper that's come out from Forbes really highlights something that's very interesting in the fact that almost 80% of data scientists' time is spent on collating, cleaning, and organizing data sets. And this also turns out to be what is the worst part of their job that so this isn't very rewarding. These people have generally been trained because they wanted to come out and work on cool algorithms and developing things. And how do you leverage data? How do you create new models of learning and understanding about the work that you're doing with the data, not cleaning it to move it from one cheminformatics software tool to the next one. There seems to be something very wrong with what's happening here. And so that maps that interest, that sort of Forbes paper mapped directly into another paper that was published by Mike Chandler from Gartner. And Mike sort of talks here about another challenge that's coming on, which is this sort of what's called technical debt. And he said during the course of companies as they move through perhaps sort of the early noughties, where there was that cusp of ELN, and then moved to lab information management systems. There were some standalone point solutions, and then companies built APIs to sort of integrate these applications, and same with registration here. And gradually this sort of suite got bigger, these different multiple sort of point solutions got greater in size, and therefore the suite of the platform to make it work. But what's happening now is that this is creating what's called a huge amount of technical debt. The burden of making it work is with the customer. And that becomes more challenging as certain point solutions, their data code is pretty old, so they're no longer supporting it. So again, an extra burden that's being put on the drug discovery research organizations. And he said the way to sort of really get this is that now this is getting to a point where people are going to drown in data, because all the data keeps pumping out from all these. The more we keep using it, we try and employ more data scientists to clean it, something's going to break. And there's been a prediction that around sort of 2030, people will have drowned in their own data and won't be able to get themselves out of it. So this is the way forward now, is that if we're going to look at optimizing informatics, is to move to a platform situation where all of your applications run on the same data code on a platform, and therefore all of the different things you need to do with the data all happen using the same data source that's accessible anywhere. And therefore it means that you can start making changes, which means that every change that happens is documented. So you're now Alcoa Plus compliant, which is very important, because when you're looking to sort of file a drug to the FDA, the first thing they want to see is your data and the governance and traceability of your data. And if that's not in place, that delays the approvals, because there's a huge amount of work to get that data together. So this data platform, helps with the sort of compliance and reduces our risk around sort of drug discovery. It improves the speed of doing this, because actually everything talks to each other. So you can make decisions faster. There's no time to move the data from one point to the next point. It just happens. And therefore the data transcription is higher, so the integrity of the data is a lot higher. So this is really where we can optimize this. Also, you're then bringing down, if you've got one sort of data, apps that run off the same platform, there should be a single interface. So your number of, from a sort of a user's perspective, you don't have to have multiple trainings to learn multiple different softwares and navigations and how things work, be trained on that, run multiple service agreements. So this total cost of ownership of a chem informatics platform dramatically reduces as well. And a recent paper that's just come out from Ernst & Young around, it sort of talks about sort of biotechs, but actually I think it applies right across the industry, is that we're sort of now at this cusp point where we have to decide what do we want to do. If we want to get, you're going to sort of think about, right, how do you get the molecule faster? Because either you're in two ways. You can either focus your endeavors on doing more R&D and discovery, or you're going to compromise that by building, almost building your own chem informatics half of your business. And what's been really said is that the sort of the key thing from sort of either be it investment to biotech or what big pharma are looking for to invest and to partner is focus on R&D, make the molecule faster. And if you can move, offset some of the sort of challenges, partner with strategic partners, get strategic partners that really move you on and become that sort of real sort of, game changer and giving you a strategic advantage. Get the molecule as fast as you can, because that's the priority here. This also would optimize your operating model in terms of sort of where you're able to allocate your resources and where you're able to focus your medicinal chemists. You're removing a huge amount of administration from their day-to-day. But also this helps, the key priority here is your data foundation. This is the thing that's really challenging us at the moment, is get your data sorted. So that means single data code, single platform. And that's been the recommendation from multiple different sort of consultancy, both sort of outside the industry or looking at the big four from the global perspective, but also where we've had sort of deeper dive focus to life science industry itself. And so that's sort of where Dotmatics has sort of really been sort of looking to try, how do we support this? And so over the years, we've been building this best of breed applications as well as building our platform. And the goal here is to say, how can we provide these sort of unparalleled insights for our sort of research R&D partners? So with that, we've now developed a sort of an out-of-the-box solution that runs all of our applications on a single platform. So all of our capabilities that we've built now are all there out of the box on a single platform supported. So the idea is that it moves the timeline from sort of hit to candidate selection. We're reducing that timeline. It should hopefully help really have a fully integrated chem informatics suite for our customers and enable them to make much better informed decision making, move projects faster. Our reporting should be simpler because it's just pulling from one database, and actually you can use the database as a presentation. So no more pulling stuff out, putting it in a PowerPoint in order to share. Actually, you can take everybody to the same database, or they can all see it in real time. So it helps project teams and decision making become much more efficient. So when we look back to these capabilities that would support the sort of drug discovery workflow as we move to sort of build our sort of enumerated libraries to get to our candidates, this is sort of really where we have capabilities to support all of this. And if we sort of look here, these are all the configurations and modules that we have built in order to support this decision-making process and this workflow. So be it from sort of library enumeration, machine learning, where you can continually layer your results on top of each other. So the statistical modeling helps you enumerate a new set of suggestions for your next library that you build. We have CRO portals, which is really important now, where you can actually securely send the information out to a CRO, and they have their own portal that they can upload their data into. And if you're working with multiple CROs, you can actually layer all of the data on top of each other and see that, again, that informed decision making. Everything's in that one table for you. The cool thing is it's nice and secure, so each partner CRO can only see their own thing. It's secure, and now you're able to really move data through and optimize your workflow a lot faster. You've got lots of request management for QC, also for assay screening. So it really helps that sort of day-to-day workflow move a lot faster as well. This is a couple of snapshots. I know that I appreciate they're very small here, but it's showcasing that actually this is all pulling from one data source, one platform, one data code is able to support all of these different views and different decisions that need to be made in order to do this. So and again, so now you can access this. It's cloud-based, so everybody, people working from home a lot more, or outsourcing and working with partners. So this can be done through multiple points. So it's a cloud-based solution, so anybody can do this anywhere. So in terms of how we sort of pulled that together to make that happen, we offer sort of two packages now. Dotmatics used to have a series of sort of point solutions that were sort of sold, and you can buy different. Here we said, right, you know what? Let's make this very, very simple. We're going to do an Enterprise and Enterprise Plus. So everything that you see on this right left-hand side here in the plum color, here are the key modules that we provide. Also then all the configurations for discovery and chemistry, all the analytical templates that help sort of these protocols and workflows, and all of the sort of the packaging that we could, or the package for services that we provide to get you up and running. If you're doing more sort of work outsourcing to CROs and also doing a lot of assay screening, then the Enterprise Plus, which is everything that's in the plum color on the left, plus everything that's in the green, is now enables you to sort of basically run that entire workflow that we've shown on the previous slides. So again, very simple decision making about where we're enabling people to get best of breed capabilities, sort of world-class sort of capabilities, running off optimized on a single data platform, reduce technical debt and cost of ownership to really move drug discovery forward. So it's a pretty simple process. We can support if you're working with CRO, small molecule, yes, CROs, yes, Enterprise Plus. If you're not doing screening or CRO work, it's just the Enterprise. If you're doing biologics, we also support this as well, because we have our bioregister configuration that you can add on as well, and we also have an antibody solution as we step forward into that sort of large molecule area as well. So this is sort of some feedback that we've got from our customers that have been helping us build these the Enterprise and Enterprise Plus configurations. It's really helped them sort of get the broadest and deepest capabilities all in the one space. So it's really optimized their building of a cheminformatics suite. And one customer in particular who's been based up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, said, 10 chemists, medicinal chemists, he's right at that decision because they outsource a lot of their work to CROs, and they're at that decision point of, do I employ a data scientist, and I'm looking at a pretty expensive salary tag if I'm getting somebody in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or do I bring a complete informatics suite and strategically partner here like this, which actually in terms of like the cost of doing that meant that actually they could do this and then have more cash to go and get some more research capability into their organization. So the fact that now everything's on the one base means that every experiment matters. They can catch all that data and see all that data in the one place. Now they're not compromising on speed or accuracy, because actually the movement of the information is all taken care of, because all of these apps run the same data code and off the same platform, and the information is reliable and repeatable. I shared a sort of stage with some head of discovery from a large pharmaceutical company a year ago, who said that they had to repeat an entire year's worth of study, because that was deemed the most trustworthy, cost-effective option, because all the data they had around sort of the legacy parts of the product, they did not trust. They had no idea what was the right single, there was no single source of truth. So actually it was more financially viable for them to actually repeat all that experiment. I think, crikey, we've just lost an entire year of discovery just repeating something that we've done already, to see whether we got the right results, or whether we can really see whether that's going to do something for us in terms of building a new therapy. So Again, we've got some other partners that have really worked with us in terms of helping us develop these two solutions, and it's really enabled, as I say, sort of the scientists are able to have much better access to the data, and it's really been helpful in terms of really optimizing the time spent on medicinal chemistry rather than spent on administration. Same sort of thing here, coming from Cancer Research Institute. This has been really powerful in enabling them to work and partner and analyze all the data and see all the correlations and make really informed decisions. So we're sort of coming towards the conclusion, but I mean, so where we are, you know, pulled this slide out because we sort of are working in multiple areas to sort of build solutions around different sort of workflows. Biologics is another one that we have out at the moment. Formulation, so anything sort of electrochem, petrochem, you know, more material science. We also sort of have products that support that as well, and data management. So within the drug discovery piece for small molecule, we've got these sort of 6 key components here. As we move towards the end of the year, there will be an export option into GraphPad Prism, which is now part of the Dotmatics family, and we acquired BioBright a couple of years ago. So now we're also looking towards instrument integration as part of that future vision of, you know, the seamless flow of data from instrumentation. So everything that we see in these 6 modules is here today. This is a little bit more in the near term, and then sort of really move into next year. We're starting to sort of see bringing that through as well. So hopefully over the last 35 minutes, you've been able to sort of see where we've been able to highlight where the challenges are, where the opportunities are, and where, you know, some thoughts around what could be done to help us, you know, make the most of some sort of very, you know, really sort of key things that could help us move that drug discovery timeline, where those friction points are coming in at the moment that are really allowing us to leverage their full potential, the likes of CROs, the likes of AI. And so here with this informatics suite, we're hoping that this will really help improve that productivity and collaboration. It will improve the efficiency of everybody working in drug discovery, be it medicinal chemists, assay screening scientists, you know, QC analysts, anybody that has to sort of work and as part of the project. Hopefully this is now going to really make it easier to you know, move each of those steps and tasks in the process a lot faster. As we said, single source of data means that we're optimizing the integrity of the data, which stops us having to repeat work because we don't trust the data. It improves our compliance and from the governance point of view and a regulatory point of view. And because we're moving to sort of single cloud versus multiple cloud of multiple point solutions, we're hopefully reduce that cyber security risk. And there's multiple papers out there that talk about lots of companies that have suffered cyber attack. So if we can optimize that by having a sort of single secure cloud, which we sort of work with AWS on this, because it's a global you know, cloud that's sort of cyber secure. So hopefully if we remove this risk, cost and time, this is also going to have the sort of the upside. You know, we've removed the pain, and then the sort of the gain that comes is that actually we're going to be able to make better decisions. So the insights and the innovations that we're going to get are going to come, you know, be better. They're going to be faster, more cost effective and risk free. And so with that, I thank you all for your very kind attention. And I know Ben's going to probably jump and join in with us now. Sorry, Ben.
I am, yeah, I'm here.
There we go.
Super. Thank you so much, Haydn. Haydn's email address is still on the screen now, so we'd love to take as many of your questions as we possibly can. But if something occurs to you later and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that during the webinar, then Haydn's been very kind and has shared his email address. So it's on the screen now. Make a note of it, and he will be more than happy to hear from any of you if you do have any questions about how this could benefit you. Well, before we get into your questions, one thing that I find really interesting based on other trends that I've seen across different sort of chemical industries, CROs have clearly, or it's a partnership, and in particular CROs have clearly been a focus point for you. So for those who aren't really familiar, contract research organizations, CROs, are usually sort of a bit quicker and have more capacity than a startup would. And the flip side is they're a bit more agile than the really big pharma companies. So they're becoming an absolutely essential part of this entire workflow across every, with touch points in every bit of the chemical industry. Clearly, there's been a key focus for you as well on how that interaction takes place.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my sort of background is I worked for a CRO in my early stages in chemistry when I was in the lab. And so it was contract, and this was at the time of CombiChem. So making big libraries of compounds that big pharma companies would outsource to us. And we always knew that we were on we were competing with many other sort of CROs at the time as well. But you saw sort of how big companies like Pfizer down at the sandwich site, that became now is the discovery part, when actually different parts of that legacy company then sort of actually was sort of fractioned off and became their own entities as well. And Pfizer, I think, very publicly, was one of those sort of first big pharmas that went to sort of really a massive outsource model with CROs in order to sort of get that synthesis done. And, and that model's also then moved through from that sort of analysis CRO partnerships and screening CRO partnerships as well. So this has been a huge sort of way of, like say, getting a sort of faster turnaround of molecules as well. That was also because it was a sort of pay for molecule type model. So the goal of every CRO was, right, let's get this fast, because there was also used to be rewards for getting them first. If you basically, if you had a plate, whoever really you were competing, who could get that molecule in the plate first, and there was a sort of a premium around that. So so on that paper molecule, and then but with that, which is great because you've optimized a certain part of that process. But sort of perhaps the hidden side of it was the fact of, right, the transfer of data, the communication, all of the sort of it took time out of the pharma company, or the parent company, if you like, that was asking for the outsourcing. So it meant a lot of their own resources setting up the meetings, and then you'd have the meetings themselves. So your CRO partner would actually have to get all this stuff ready. And there was a lot of that sort of conversation around, what does this data mean? Is it the right data? Is it trust? Especially when we were looking at sort of much more sort of global CRO partnership, which is there today. In the early phase, that was really problematic, and I've not been in the lab for a while now, but speaking to my sort of peers that are still there and that are working at sort of biotechs and sort of farmers, the challenge is still there, but it's sort of almost latent, if you like. It's just sort of just accepted this is what it's like, but actually it will. Now, as technology is evolving, perhaps there's a way of actually optimizing this data transfer process, and even sort of the simple things like writing, reporting out each week. Actually, could you do this dynamically off of the database, and people actually can see that database immediately and before the meeting anyway? So really, you're moving on from, this is the news, to actually, we've all digested that. Here is the decision making. So suddenly the purpose of the meeting changes as well. And that actually, so all the prep that's gone, and then sort of the post-call analysis, if you like, or post-meeting analysis of what this means and what the next. All of this now, it becomes much more optimized. But this is all hidden. There's no quantification around that sort of process waste, if you like. And so I think this is sort of would be interesting to sort of scratch at this, because then you can say, well, actually, with a better sort of data transfer and informatics tooling, actually we could suddenly optimize quite a significant amount of time and cost to this process.
You're talking about hidden costs. One of the key words, of course, in CRO is contract, and the amount of time and legal expertise that organizations have to spend writing the contracts, and it's back and forth, and lawyers are racking up the fees every time every letter is sent. Knowing from the outset that actually this is the platform that you're using, this is therefore the data standard that you need, and we can, in a few clicks, create your own portal into that. That makes all of that process a lot simpler as well, because the portal exists, is standardized, will do everything you need it to do, and preserves the integrity. And integrity is another word you used a lot. Preserves the integrity of that data.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the sort of, you know, think how this information has just been pinged across from email, or somebody's having to set another portal up or something like this. This creates a lot of cyber security challenges on its own anyway, which
Yeah.
again, if you are the parent company, you've got to manage that in some way. And obviously, we're all quite sort of, you know, obviously very careful about sort of our, you know, our intellectual property with regards to sort of what we're making here. So yeah, there's a huge amount of challenges around this, and yeah, did it all transcribe in the right way? There's so much that can be optimized through that process. But I think, you know, the first thing that we sort of looked at, right, the benefit was we
Mm.
reduced the timeline, but actually with it, that's one measure. You know, I think there's a sort of case of, well, were there other countermeasures that sort of, you know, either were not deemed or were found to be more difficult or weren't necessarily measured at the time. But it's probably the right time to sort of approach that, as probably the advances in the technology has enabled that to sort of come into focus now, and think, well, actually, could we do this better?
So speaking of doing things better, one thing that always or can be an issue with looking at how we handle our data is that it's very tempting to think if I was starting from a completely blank slate, then this is how I do it. And from that, you design a perfectly interconnected single source of truth, etc. But the
Yeah.
real world is much messier, much messier than that. You've got data that started out from somebody's PhD research, and then it went through a spin out from university startup, maybe then got bought up by another company or became part of a partnership. So the data has been through so many different layers, different techniques, different hands, and so on. How do you go about, when you have all of this data from different sources, actually starting to combine it into something that you can trust, you can rely on, and that has, again, I'll use your own word, integrity?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges. You know, if you were a sort of company that's gone through and adopting all of these different tools
Mm.
over sort of the last sort of 15 to 20 years, that you're now at that, yeah, like I said, multiple acquisitions, everybody's had their own different version and system, and home brews as well.
Of
That
course.
was also quite a big thing. You know, I think Big Pharma also made a lot of their own ELNs fit for purpose, or what it was fit for purpose at the time. And yeah, it's that sort of data migration. I mean, we do support companies if they sort of want to migrate data through. And obviously, this is probably where a lot of companies are quite. It's where they sort of feel a little bit more nervous, because obviously this is the crown jewels. However, you know, it's in data science, so we sort of look at how do we help people migrate at a pace that they're comfortable with. Is one phase. So yeah, I think everybody's going to be on a slightly different journey. If you're a sort of, you know, smaller enterprise, your ability to sort of rip the band-aid if you only got 1 or 2 point solutions is actually a lot faster. Or if you're starting from nothing, you can just go. Then it's really, as you're going through the sort of medium-sized to sort of, you know, global enterprise, you're now going to look at this because it's a bigger project. So there's quite a lot of decision making around what do you want to migrate, what has value in migrating, and building out a timeline of migration as well. That becomes part of it, but that's sort of where we sort of support to say, right, okay, let's think about the plan, because actually you're not going to be able to migrate everything, because actually there's a huge amount of resource time on your side. So what becomes, you know, a sort of stepwise program to move you to where you need to be, and get you onto this sort of platform, single data code sort of panacea.
Mm. And sort of, yeah, maximize the efficiency of that process as well. You, I guess ultimately you guys can absolutely help with moving that through and handling it once it's in there, but at the end of the day, the person who is the original originator of that data knows what's there, and they know better about that data than anyone else in the world.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is also, you know, the challenge around sort of the whole, you know, the research lab and the discovery lab around sort of IT. It's been interesting sort of seeing it be a bit of a change in dynamic over the last sort of, I'd say probably 8 to 10 years,
Mm.
as digitalization became sort of one of the big buzzwords. You know, and data-driven modeling, and how do you use data as an asset, all this sort of thing. This is sort of suddenly started moving, where that sort of who pays for it, you know, different budgets, and who owns the budget, that started to move. So you're sort of seeing it move to sort of like the chief financial officers, as well as the chief scientific officers, or chief information, or chief digital officers. Chief digital officers is now a title that wasn't around maybe 10 years ago. So there's a bit of a balance there, and now they're looking at, well, actually, we're going to invest in digitalization, but there's lots of different areas in the business we can digitalize, and you've sort of seen procurement being optimized, and all those sort of, but the lab almost got left to do its own thing. And it was, and so, it didn't seem to sort of be, and so it was never challenged to have return on investment data in order to gain sponsorship. But I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in this paradox now. We recently have had a former CIO from BMS join our sort of exec board as an advisor. And he said that exact question. He used to never be involved in those conversations. He was never asked, only to like say, "Oh, can I have the money?" And it's just sort of, "Oh, well, you guys know what you're doing." But now, because he's having to look at it, he actually wants to be involved with that conversation now, and he needs to understand, because he's not generally, he may not have been a scientist or a medicinal chemist. So telling him it can move this from this to that, which doesn't mean anything to him. So we want to say, right, well, how much time is that going to help take out of your day to allow you to focus on R&D? That's the sort of conversation he can understand and say, right, that makes complete sense, because if I can give all of my medicinal chemists another sort of 2 hours a day back, I now know that that I don't have to sort of quantify it, but the maths is pretty simple, because I've now suddenly increased our day by 20% of optimizing our R&D focus, which is really important if the end game is to make the molecules faster. So again, stuff for all those other things we talked about, what could be a time and cost around any of those other challenges. Once we start building it out and saying, right, this is what it gives you back, and they said, because they're not afraid of making long-term investments at all. Because making the molecule takes about 18 years. So the goal is that, right, okay, well, if we can understand why a platform play running all those apps actually that's where we need to get to. Actually, we can see that gives us a strategic advantage in terms of getting a molecule out there faster. So so there's a very different conversation starting to happen. So it's which is really interesting from seeing it sort of from me both inside and outside an organization as well.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the numbers you brought up earlier. Was it 79% of data scientists, or 79% of data scientists' time is spent purely on data hygiene?
Yeah,
it feels such a waste.
It is. You think about the talent that's come through that joins an organization. And I think there's another paper I read a few years ago where it's saying that this becomes completely unsustainable, because the cost of bringing more and more data scientists to clean up more and more data that we're producing is just at some point it's going to sort of impact the overall productivity even further, and there's a breaking point. And so there's lots of different papers out there to talk about it. But you said the talent that we have in these people is just being lost. And at some point, there's we're starting to see sort of HR individuals getting involved in some conversations. And I think, what are you doing here? And it becomes a real challenge. Some companies, it's a real challenge for us, because we get people coming in and they want to be doing the cool algorithm, and they're not. And this is like something they're very disenchanted with what the job is, and thinking, could we not be doing this better? And they go. And if, like you say, if they've been part of that sort of informatics group that built it, well, actually, if the information is only with them, there's no continuity. So a lot of intelligence walks out the door, and that becomes a big risk as well. And again, suddenly we've lost something in terms of our ability to use that data, or to understand how to use it. So there's lots of what we sort of things you don't even sort of think about straight away. But again, from a med chemist, if you're a med chemist and getting very frustrated that you're doing more admin than you are research, which you've spent quite a long time training for. So I've seen a few of my friends who got to a point and said, you know what, stepping out. Because there's sort of get to a certain point that this is becoming a real challenge. And is it getting better, or are we sort of just not addressing the problems that are there? So it's really interesting. It's sort of time. It's like, right, we're starting to see a few burning platforms that are going to mean that there's a trigger point to us going and thinking, right, how do we fix this? Because if we don't, we're in a bit of trouble. And are we going to get to that point where we get to the the patent cliff? Everyone's sort of drumming on the fact of AI. There is a sort of being around combi chem where combi chem didn't quite work out as everybody wanted it to be, and you got this patent cliff that happened sort of in the noughties, where we weren't getting the right molecules out. If we're not careful, not everything, just because you've got a hammer, not everything is a nail. So there's a sort of element of like, right, how do you use it? But if you're not even going to be able to get to a point of your data, you're not going to be able to use it because your data's nowhere near ready, then here's another thing that could have been something brilliant. But actually, did we really think about how to use it in the most strategic way?
Especially in a competitive market space, being a year, 6 months behind another company to get approval for a medication can be the life or death of a company.
Well, yeah. I mean, the recent vaccine sort of go to market that we saw. Now, there was one major pharmaceutical company that had a vaccine ready to go at the same time, and I think there was a transcription error in someone's dosing, and it got pulled, and then they came to market 12 months later. In terms of sort of what that meant for them as an organisation, was pretty huge. So yeah, sort of this whole aspect of data integrity and the ability to sort of trust it, use it, and it be ready for FDA approval. If you can remove these sort of transcription errors at point of data capture, and as they're moving through the system, this is going to make a huge difference to our speed to market.
Yeah. And of course, having the change log means when that happened, why it happened, you can prevent it happening next time.
Absolutely. I mean, I am still surprised at how many bits of paper you still see with crossings out, initialing on it, and a date, and that is still deemed compliant. If I'm perfectly honest, but there is another way. And again, when you sort of look at getting to building up an ecosystem, you look at all the big four tech giants that are out there. The sort of the AI they've developed, like with their voice recognition. It was Alexa, book me a haircut. That sort of thing, that didn't happen by chance. That was building up multiple best of breed applications that then now run on a platform and talk to each other. So not only could you say, I want a haircut, they could look at the calendar, they bought YouTube, so they could do all the voice recognition, so the assistant could actually understand what was being said the other end. They got the maps, so they could actually focus when was the traffic going along, so they could measure that this is the optimal time of day, this is when it fits in your calendar, and all that happens. And that's because single platform, single data code. But that took 20 years to build that database, but the AI is trained on really clean data.
Yes, and that, I suppose, a similar environment where it's been going on in the background for 20, 30 years in terms of how people collect data, with how people interact with machinery and information. But actually, it's only the last few years when you've actually seen those connections bear fruit. So those sorts of connected smart home devices that know where you are, where your hairdresser is, when they're open, etc.
Yeah.
It's only literally 3-4 years that those have been available.
Absolutely, and I think that's sort of why this sort of conversation is right to have now, because it's sort of in scope. It's feasible from a technology perspective, and I think when we looked at what we've done with the software, all the decision making around the purchasing of the software to build an ecosystem was all correct because it optimized the task. So there was definite value that was provided immediately, but now it's got to be, well, the secondary challenge of that is now, how do we optimize again and get everything to talk to each other? So how do we remove the next set of workarounds that we were doing, that saying, is this necessary now? Is there a way of getting better? So none of the decisions that have been made are wrong in any way. Absolutely, they were the right things to be doing. It's just a case of, with that, it becomes there's a secondary challenge now, is to say, right, what's the next step in order, the next sort of industry revolution, if you like, towards digitize it. Well, now it's actually connectivity and making it all talk together. That's the next revolution that's going to happen.
But we've got about 2 minutes left. We can overrun a little bit, but let's try and keep us close to time. Let's have one last question. Let's just do the big picture. What are the biggest challenges that like a biotech startup is currently facing in the small molecule drug discovery space?
So with the biotech, this again is another really interesting time as well. And we're gonna publish a couple of papers or white papers and put some articles out in the oncoming weeks. Is that we're seeing biopharma and pharma, acquiring biotechs at a much later stage. So whereas it used to be that you would sort of try and get in early with that sort of phase 1, phase 2, maybe phase 3 candidate in the pipeline, what's happened is that there's still been failure happened. Because again, you put 10, when the numbers on the chart that we get earlier on in the process, usually 10 candidates come in at clinical phase 1, only 1 comes out, which again, 90% attrition rate, so 90% cost of failure. So we're seeing sort of the industry being a little bit more careful with its money, and actually not investing or buying out until commercialization. And a year into commercialization, right, we've got traction in the market. So that's going to change. So actually now biotech actually has to think about, I need to get this. It's not a case of getting it into phase 1 is enough. I've actually got to get it all the way through. So I've got to invest in different things because now I've got to learn how to commercialize. I'm not going to rely on the pharma sort of company being able to do that once they've got my candidate. So therefore again, it's like, right, what do I want to invest in? So one, I've got to get the molecule out there as fast as I can. So I've got to make the best informed decisions, reduce my cost, because now I've got to pay for legal, sales forces, all this sort of thing. So very different consideration. And then there's other models that we see where there's sort of a potential sort of partnership investment at this point with a get out clause at certain points as well. So and then venture capital. So the modeling around it is changing as well, as sort of farmers becoming a little bit more risk averse before bringing that, because they've had their fingers burned over the last sort of couple of decades.
So okay, we are out of time, but I think it sounds to me like when faced with shifting sands, which these industries always are, that what you need is a firm foundation, and the best thing to build that foundation on is good quality data that you can trust and that has integrity. And I think you've demonstrated that wonderfully today. It's been a whistle-stop tour, and I'm sure people will get in touch with follow-up questions and other things that they'd like to know. Thank you so much, Haydn, for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who came and joined us live, for getting involved, asking questions, being involved in the conversation. So thank you once again to Haydn and to Dotmatics for putting us in touch and for bringing us this really interesting area to look at, and these important things about understanding our data and making best use of it, and how people like Dotmatics are finding ways for you, the chemists out there, to spend less time polishing your data and more time actually doing something with it. And that's clearly really important to a lot of you. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Ben Valsler, Chemistry World's digital editor, and I'll see you for another Chemistry World webinar very soon. Take care.